holy cow.
I'm like, all right, well, maybe we do have a problem.
We'd like to begin. The sign-up sheet is still over with Jody. If anyone would still, yep, of course. You can sign up at any time. Yep. Oh, no, please, just sign up. So the public hearing on ordinance 9098 is now open. A public hearing is a meeting that provides the opportunity for public discussion regarding ordinances and other matters pending before City Council. Today, ordinance 9098 is at issue. Ordinance 9098 amends and adopts Chapter 150 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green. Chapter 150 contains our city's zoning regulations. Interested parties may express their views and submit evidence supporting those views at this public hearing. The information shared will become a part of the city's permanent record and may be used by members of City Council in deciding whether or not to adopt the ordinance. This public hearing is the most recent step in a process to update our zoning code that began in 2018. The Bowling Green zoning code was originally adopted nearly 50 years ago, and this comprehensive zoning code update is a critical part of putting the vision and goals of our city's planning process and documents into action. So there are usually 4 parts to our public hearings. First, the staff report. Second, the applicant's testimony. Third, public testimony. And fourth, discussion by members of city council. No legislative action is taken at these public hearings, but council members will have the opportunity to react to testimony we have heard this evening and discuss as a body. Our public hearings are usually conducted by council's Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee, but because this zoning update process has been so lengthy and is so important, we are conducting this public hearing as a committee of the whole this evening. To start, we usually receive a staff report from Planning Director Heather Saylor. Heather is here this evening, but because council has been considering this legislation since the fall of last year, we won't hear from Heather at this time, but she will stick around in case there are any questions she can answer later. Next, we usually receive the applicant's testimony, but there is no applicant for ordinance 9098. So we have sprinted to the third part of our public hearing and will now hear testimony from the public. So Jody, was there any correspondence? No. So we will now receive in-person testimony. We have asked members of the public to sign up. If you would like to sign up and have not already, Jody still has a sign-up sheet. So let's get started. Jody, who is first?
Rose Hess.
I believe so. No. That guy.
You just might have to move it close to you.
Hello? Okay, thank you. My name is Rose Hess, 216 Baldwin Avenue, Bowling Green, Ohio. My favorite subject, I'll try and be brief, occupancy. Our occupancy law has been on the books since January the 6th, 1975, as most of you know. It provided for no more than 3 unrelated adults in R1 and R2.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe we'll move it. Yep, try that.
Yeah, why don't you take it out of the stand and just hold it?
If you'd like, if you're comfortable with that, sure.
Why, I can hear it, and
Yeah,
They,
this room's funny.
should I face them?
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no?
Then it won't work at all.
That's
I
gonna
thought
save the
they
day.
fixed,
behind you.
yeah,
Like this.
try talking right into it like
all
that.
right. Now can you hear me?
This is why you went first, Rose.
In the back. Can they hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
As long
thank you.
as long as you're talking into it, they can hear.
I don't want, I feel like I'm eating it. All right. Between 1975 and 2004, it was not vigorously enforced, according to a statement that one of my favorite mayors, Mr. Quinn, made on October the 4th, 2004. The city then realized, after doing nothing, that over occupancy was on the rise, and the city decided to become more proactive and aggressive. Those are Mr. Quinn's words. In retrospect, I think he meant reactive. The city did indeed become more aggressive in enforcing the law. We even hired a code enforcement officer, and the policy remained in place until it was challenged 5 years ago in 2018 in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Ohio, Western Division. In that case called Yoder versus City of Bowling Green, Judge Knepp ruled that our law, which was no more than 3 in a single family home, was arbitrary. It was struck down. Furthermore, while renters were limited to no more than 3 prior to the court case, he pointed out that there were also 233 houses in the city that had as many as 8 and even 10. But they were exempt from this regulation because they were grandfathered. Today, that number is probably closer to 262 or maybe even higher. The judge concluded that occupancy should be based on the number of bedrooms. If nothing else, it removed the arbitrary policy that we had, with the exception of the non-conforming houses. He just felt that our policy was arbitrary and also oppressive, I believe. Now we have a new zoning code about to be voted on, and this policy is going to be amended or modified. Some houses will allow one per bedroom and others will allow more. A 3-bedroom house will be limited to 3 unrelated persons. A 4-bedroom will be limited to 4. However, a 2-bedroom house will not be limited to 2. A 2-bedroom house will be allowed to have 3. A 1-bedroom house will not be limited to 1. A 1-bedroom house will be allowed to have 3. What is the rationale, I'm asking each of you, for allowing more than 1 bedroom in 1 and 2-bedroom dwellings? This, too, in my humble opinion, is arbitrary, and it's not in the spirit of the court ruling. And I gave this a lot of thought. This creates another potential violation. In a 1-bedroom house, it may not be desirable or feasible for all 3 to snuggle up in 1 bedroom, but they're allowed to have 3 in a 1-bedroom. 1 or 2 just might have to think about sleeping someplace else. This result will create another violation because the judge said, under no circumstances shall dining rooms, living rooms, kitchens, or any other space than a bedroom be used for sleeping. So, this is my opinion, I guess. There is an easy solution. Council, you guys and you lady have the power to enact laws and policies. And I'm asking council to keep and codify the policy that we now have, which is 1 unrelated person in a house per bedroom. This is not arbitrary by the judge. Thank you.
Rose. Next.
Hey, Rose, I gotta pick this up a little bit. Maybe. Will you just hold this up for me? I seriously can't get this thing to stand up. Broken, Rose. All right, we'll do this. Good.
Spend on this building.
This one? Hey. My name's Matt Bostorff. I live at 433 South Maple Street. I've had an opportunity to meet with the East Side group and the Save Our BG Neighborhoods group. And first, let me say, amazing group of people, super nice, very accommodating. I got to go see the inside of the Drains house. It's freaking amazing. If you ever get the opportunity, I'm not suggesting you go over there and like break into their home or anything, but it's outstanding. You sure? It's crazy cool in there. I am likely to be in the minority tonight, I think, based on looking around. I am a proponent of the zoning changes in the city. My concern is that we're sort of stepping over dollars to pick up the dimes here. we have a much bigger issue here than just how many people are sleeping in a bed together. And not that that's not important. I don't want to undermine what Rose Hess just said. Those are important issues that I think we can continue to talk about. I think that's another important fact that we can continue. This is a fluid document. We can continue to have these conversations as things go. But I really don't want to see something truly transformative for the city of Bowling Green get washed out because we're so hyper focused on one particular, although very important to the people that are here. And I don't want to not focus on that, but one small piece of the code. I watched the city council meeting on YouTube from Monday. There was a very kind young lady there named Lee Eckel, and she had a couple questions that I just wanted to kind of cover very quickly. She said something to the effect about the city injecting things into the code, and I thought that that was somewhat of an inappropriate word. I think what the city is trying to do is accommodate, not inject. She made mention of local neighborhoods used to have grocery stores and salons and small businesses like that. And I happen to own a building that used to be a grocery store on Adams Street, very cute little building. And I think that's a great point that the PR district is going to allow, not inject, allow for growth like that. You're by creating rules that will incentivize people to maybe start those small businesses if the market will dictate those businesses would be successful, right? We're not forcing anybody to put a vape shop or a barber shop or a corner store. I know some of those things have been written out of the code, but we're allowing for those things to happen. She also mentioned that she hadn't heard from any members of the community who support the zoning changes and wondered who would benefit. My argument would be everyone. There's people, regardless of the fact that I'm a landlord. I'll put my uh, change hats for a moment. I'm not a landlord at this point, but we live in a very small home. And I can imagine people who are a young couple and have a child wanting to have more space instead of moving into a larger home, maybe in the Bird Streets or in Stone Ridge, might consider reinvesting in the home that they currently live in if they had the capability of doing that and if the code would allow them to do so. I think that's sometimes challenging when you look at density and lot coverage. And I think those things are being missed. Those opportunities for homeowners to reinvest in their neighborhood, that's being missed because we're so afraid that somebody's going to misuse the codified ordinances. And that fear, I think, is something that I really want to harp on a little bit, is that we need to stop thinking and using the fear to keep us from making good decisions in the city. She also asked, why does density need to be increased? To me, that's a very easy one. We have a severe shortage of affordable housing. We hear that term used an awful lot, affordable housing. Don't underestimate the need for rentals as affordable housing. And I think that sometimes those are things that get overlooked. That we think about affordable housing, we want to think about single family affordable housing. To some people, that's just not something that will ever come to fruition, or they choose not to do that. They don't want to be a homeowner. They want to be a renter, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. She also mentioned that she hadn't heard from the landlords, but suspected that they were in favor of it based on economic gain. I don't want to speak for all landlords, but I would bet she's right. I think landlords would be appreciative of the ability to reinvest in some of their properties and maybe have some more economic growth. And I don't think that should be something that we should be afraid of. In fact, we should embrace that, because the more money that I make, the more taxes the city takes. I think that's good for the city. My final point is I continue to hear comments, and I've asked this question to both groups, that the city is overrun with multifamily units and overrun with ADUs, and the percentage is so high and the ratio is off and there's 65% and on and on. And I ask you, what is a healthy percentage or ratio of homeowner or occupied homes to rentals? And what is a healthy percentage of ADUs in the city? Because I never hear an offering of a target. Like, what are we trying to hit? What's the threshold? Is 50-50 the threshold? I never hear what that actual number is. It's just simply that we have too many, right? So I would ask you that question, for us to define what that percentage should be so that we have a hard target to hit. And frankly, I'm not sure that that's something that it should be almost an arbitrary target, because I think the market would dictate what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. If we have more people that want to rent, then shouldn't we accommodate those people because they're working in town, they have children in town, they shop in town, they take their kids to school in town, and if they choose to rent, let's accommodate those people. If the market dictates that they want to rent, let's accommodate those folks. Finally, and I mean zero disrespect to the people that are probably glaring at me from behind, let's keep in mind, um, David Drain even mentioned, they're a small group of people, and they're a passionate group of people, but again, they are small, and I'm not sure that their views represent um, the cross section of this city. I mean, we have 30,000 residents in the city, and there might be 75 people sitting behind me currently, and I think some people do have different opinions than the folks that are sitting behind me tonight. I just want to make sure we keep that in perspective. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Jody?
All right. Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you for having me up here. I am also here tonight as a proponent of the
That,
proposed.
excuse me, can you
Oh,
can you share your address, please?
yeah, I forgot about the procedure. My name is Matt Kaufman. I live at 450 South Enterprise Street, apartment 4.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, I am also here as a proponent of the proposed zoning code tonight. And I want to echo everything that Matt Bosdorf said. He probably has put things a lot more intellectually and more collected than I'm about to put things here. But really, I just want to speak from the perspective as somebody who is a young professional who is living in town, who is not a BGSU student, and how this zoning code could help me and other people who want to live in the city and rent in the city as young professionals continue to do so and continue to grow our population and accommodate their needs. Um, One of the biggest things that I want to talk about is that, there's not a lot of us that are here that are young people in their early 20s who are renting but aren't students at the university. I know lots of people love this town and love everything that BG has to offer, me being one of them. But so many people that I've talked to and known during my time here have not been able to make Bowling Green work long term as a place to live because they don't have housing options here that meet their needs. I know that most people who are my age, including myself, are not looking to buy homes. We're staying single for longer. I'm sure most of you already heard these already. We're not having kids as early. There's a lot more demand for smaller homes, for rentals, for smaller populations of people to live in those homes. And I think even now, as the cost of homes have skyrocketed, um, be, purchasing a home is even less attainable than it was maybe in the past. And you'd think, in contrast, the solution to that would be lying in our abundance of rental housing that we have in the city. I think Matt mentioned a number, something in the ballpark of 60 to 65% of our housing being rental housing, and that's absolutely correct. But the feasibility of that housing working as a place to plant roots long term drastically drops after you stop being a student here in Bowling Green. I know that most of our rental properties here in town are marketed towards students, are kind of presented as being for the students. And, once you are no longer a student here, there those housing options that maybe they may be taken care of a little bit less than rentals that you would want to live in. They become less of a viable option, and you start running out of options for you to live in the city. I've even had some people say that at that point it feels like you're left with two choices: either buy an apartment that's not going to meet your needs, that is going to be a little bit worse for wear, or get out and move somewhere else. I've had people who have loved Bowling Green and wanted to live here long term who have said that that's why they moved out, because they couldn't find any of those housing options here for them. And excuse me, sorry. I personally was lucky to find my current apartment that I'm in. It was one of 4 total units available when I started looking for it after I graduated, and was the only one of those 4 that was well kept and maintained enough for me to feel comfortable and safe living there. And if things keep going the way that we are, with a lack of housing options that are affordable and specifically meant for people who aren't just college students at the university, then what we're doing is we're essentially being boxed out. Our generation is kind of being boxed out from living in the city and building roots here and really contributing to Bowling Green as a whole. And that's something that can affect the city in a lot of negative ways over the next couple of decades. And it's because of that reason that I am in support of this proposed zoning code, and because in support of allowing rental units like duplexes and ADUs in the zone, because I feel like it's necessary. It provides people like me who love this town and want to stay here with more options when it comes to affordable, well-maintained housing. And also, it's in a part of town that's well within walking distance from most of the amenities and local shops and businesses that I'd be patroning on a day-to-day basis. Especially for young people, there's so many more of us who either don't have vehicles or are choosing to forego vehicles, and having those amenities in a walkable distance, able to be reached easily, is really important when we're considering developing new housing like this. I think that you can make something farther away from the center of the city, like the development that's going in on Brim and Newton with 150 single family residential homes, work there, because that's a different population. But if you're looking to retain people from who are students at the university who in bulk end up leaving here after they graduate, then I think that the answer is to allow, like Matt said, the market to dictate where we build these new rental units, these ADUs and these duplexes, in places where people are going to be the most likely to buy them, people like myself, and most likely to get the most out of them. Um, in addition to that, I think something to keep in mind too is that this is allowing for new housing to be created and allowing for things to happen in all of our new proposed zones with the updated language. There's nothing that has to happen without the consent of the people who currently own the homes. It's not like we'll pass the zoning code and then the next day people show up in bulldozers and tell them to get out because we're going to build a Chuck E. Cheese. I don't feel like that's obviously not what's happening. It's something that, because of the way it's set up, we wouldn't see the full fruits of the labors for many years to come after this. And it would allow this zone and other zones in the city to gradually develop in a way that would organically maintain its historical integrity. So, and the thing that I want to leave with is that I've been reading lots of opinion pieces on the zoning code, lots of just trying to consume as much news as I can. There was something great that I read in the Independent today that talked about the history of rentals existing in specifically the area where the current proposed PR district is, that Maple Pearl kind of area, and how many of our rental units, especially ones that existed and still do exist in that area, cropped up during times like the Great Depression or right after World War II, where for whatever reason, be it reduced purchasing power or a rapidly increasing population, the city had to adapt and meet the needs of creating more affordable housing for people who wanted to live in the city. And we're not in a Great Depression or a post-war era right now, but I think as home ownership, like I said, is becoming less and less attainable, and more people my age are looking to live in these more affordable housing options. The need is higher than ever, and that's why I think that not only is this beneficial, but it's necessary for the survival and the growth of both the proposed district and the city as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody, who's next?
Can everyone hear me? Good. My name is David Drain. I reside at 228 East Court Street. And I'm going to talk about density. Some of our 600 friends who think that the proposed pedestrian residential district is not a good idea spent a couple days walking around the district and actually counting the properties and seeing what they were. We found that less than 60% of the dwelling units are actually single-family homes. We found that at least 40% of the dwelling units are in 2-unit or multi-unit or ADU buildings. At least 25% of the properties surveyed already have one of these extra things on them, a 2-unit, multi-unit, or ADU. This is much greater density than you see anywhere else in Bowling Green. I gave the example of Clark Street the other day. If Clark Street had a density of 1, then the pedestrian residential district would have a density of 1.4, 40% higher. That's a very conservative estimate because we assumed that every single multi-unit dwelling had only 2 units in it. Often they have 8 units, sometimes more. So a more rational estimate would be we have at least twice the density of the rest of the city already. So if density is important, that's great. Put density somewhere else where it can be borne by the infrastructure of the area. Right now, parking is a terrible problem in our neighborhood. One of the duplexes near my house routinely has people parking over the sidewalk because their driveway isn't long enough to accommodate their 4 cars, and there's no place to park on the street. So if you want density, there are plenty of other places for it. The pedestrian residential district is not the place for that. Mention was made of numbers of people who approve of what we are doing in the BG Neighborhoods group, 600 at least. Let me remind you that the historical preservation legislation was approved on the basis of 21 people saying it was a good idea. That was considered to be a big enough number for council to establish legislation. 600 people is more than anyone has ever heard of, including Joyce Kepke, who was a councilwoman for a very, very long time. She never heard of this many people being involved in anything. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Rose Drain. I live at 228 East Court Street. I am talking today to again urge you to add design standards to the PR district. The Save Our Neighborhoods group suggests these 7 components. Number 1, apply language used in the design standards of the MUN zone to the PR district. Translated to the PR district, that would be all structures in the PR district that are newly developed, redeveloped, or undergoing facade renovations that affect more than 25% of the front facade after the effective date of this ordinance must comply with the PR district design standards. The purpose of this suggested standard supports section 150.04 of the draft zoning code titled Intent. Quote, "The purpose of the zoning code is to promote the preservation of historic resources." End quote. Suggestion number 2, provide 1 parking space per bedroom for new builds and alterations. Parking must be of a pervious material. Pervious materials need to be used for any new parking pads to assure rapid percolation and avoid overloading an already challenged storm sewer system in the older neighborhoods. The other purpose of this standard is to ensure that current and future residents are able to park their vehicles within walking distance of their homes. The PR district neighborhoods are dense. On-street parking is challenging. There isn't enough for the current density of our neighborhoods. Our narrow old streets are difficult to negotiate when they are filled with parked cars. This makes driving down them difficult, and bicycling is dangerous. Pedestrians don't have a clear view when trying to cross a fully parked up street. In addition, when the street is full of parked cars, illegal parking is happening on properties that don't have sufficient off-street parking for the number of people living in them. Suggested standard number 3. Any change to the exterior of an existing structure and the exterior of new builds must be consistent with the character of the other homes on the block and be of similar architectural materials and quality. New construction in these neighborhoods needs to respect what is already here and fit well with existing homes. Almost all of the homes in the PR district were built more than 50 years ago. Retaining the character and charm of these neighborhoods will be an asset to the city, especially once the city adopts the exterior code ordinance that the mayor and council hope to work on in the near future. Suggested standards 4 and 5. No external staircases may be added. Remove balconies from PR district standards. These provisions of the proposed amendment will apply to remodeling or new construction. Buildings currently in the PR district with these features, of course, will continue to be allowed to have them. The rationale here is that R1 and R2 zoning, as far as I could tell, do not allow balconies or external staircases, nor should they be allowed on new or remodeled structures in the PR district. Suggested standard number 6. The city will establish a design review board, a DRB, to be appointed by the mayor with membership including residents of the district, a member of the Historic Preservation Commission, and a staff person from the city planning department. The purpose of the DRB is to encourage quality building design and site planning that enhances the character of the pedestrian residential district. The city of Cleveland has a design review ordinance. That city's planning commission webpage describes the process. Quote, in order to protect property values and enhance the character and visual image of the city's central residential neighborhoods, certain proposals for construction, exterior alterations, and building demolitions must undergo a process known as design review. In Bowling Green, the DRB committee's approval of a project will be a step in the building permit process. This will give people who live in the district the opportunity to have a voice in what happens to the neighborhoods in which they live. Standard 7, add provision regarding protection for canopy trees to ensure their preservation. Canopy trees lost to disease or age must be replaced with trees of a similar type. Mature canopy trees provide public health, social, environmental, and economic benefits to the city and its residents. While the street tree requirement found in the draft zoning code section 150.78 is laudable, in many areas of the city, street trees cannot be canopy trees because of the abundant prevalence in many neighborhoods of overhead wires. It takes decades for canopy trees to reach maturity and provide the greatest benefits. This is why it is important to preserve the ones we have in these older neighborhoods. You will find more information on the value to cities of canopy trees at canopy.org. You will find an example of code written to protect a city's tree resources in the City of Harrison, Ohio's code. The Tree City USA website, arborday.org, also provides guidelines for codifying tree protection. I know I have presented a lot of detail here, and I will be sharing with you a handout of my presentation with citations for the websites. So while I have presented a lot of detail, the proposal for PR district design standards is just a beginning, a start to something that will serve to energize intentional improvements in the appearance and substance of our city. Our proposed design review board should review in detail how other cities undertake this process and develop a plan for its work in Bowling Green. On a side note, the DRB could also be used to good effect in other developing areas of the city, in particular, the new mixed-use neighborhood zone. The MUN can be, I think, an exciting evolution in the city if done right, with a vision for its potential, intentional planning, and lots of input from stakeholders. As soon as council votes on the zoning code, I hope you will turn your attention to the plans for the development of the unique mixed-use neighborhood zone. In conclusion, to preserve and protect a valuable asset of the city of Bowling Green, the central residential neighborhoods, there need to be design standards for this area of the city. These historic, unique areas of the city deserve the same consideration and protection afforded by design standards that the central business district, the new mixed-use neighborhood zone, and the Gateway District have in the draft zoning code. Construction in these neighborhoods needs to respect what is already here and fit well with the existing homes. Please add design standards for the PR district. Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
I'm Sandy Wicks. I live at 864 Scott Boulevard. That's going to be a hard act to follow. But I do want to thank everyone for having this meeting tonight. And I also want to thank the Save Our Neighborhood Committee for the work that they have done over the past several months, which includes going door to door, handing out literature, and which has already been mentioned, collecting over 600 signatures, which in doing some research has been mentioned from my time on council and also many others, it has been never in 30 some years has a petition been presented to council with over 600 citizens asking to stop this code or to revise it. This is definitely something new for this city. And it is not a minor number, as been mentioned before. It is very significant. I, like others, feel that some of this came on too suddenly for homeowners. And I feel that everyone still needs more time, as is very evident so far tonight, to consider the modifications. To that end, I strongly encourage members of council to vote to postpone the zoning changes at this time. I think, as I have mentioned before, that the creation of a citizens committee made up of homeowners, business owners, renters, and city officials is needed to further study and develop this revised proposal. Perhaps one of the things that this group might obtain is additional information about the importance of mixed zoning and why it is being proposed in other cities around the United States and how they are dealing with some of the very same issues. I do think that this added time will allow everyone to gain a better understanding about how this new zoning code and the modifications will, in the long run, help our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Steve Ricard, 502 West Wooster Street. I want to address two issues tonight. One that I've already addressed you, and I'll be relatively brief with that, and that's the issue of short-term rentals, which I understand council has made some overtures to looking at STRs in the future, possibly by the end of summer. And I'm aware of that. Our group is aware of that, but I want to keep the community apprised and council reminded that this is still out there. So on March 6th, I did address council with a 3-page tome of issues regarding short-term rentals, STRs. I'll highlight just some of the negatives with the full awareness that we have some short-term rentals in town that are beautiful, that add quality to the neighborhoods, but some of them do not. Anyhow, as you recall, I mentioned college towns that I researched are finding more serious problems with short-term rentals than they are positives. Some short-term rentals, STRs, become public nuisances, affecting public safety and noise and on-street parking and sanitation. Though STRs increase transient neighbors who may or may not respect a neighborhood's quality of life. And if that quality then declines, as we have seen in some neighborhoods, not with STRs, but with rental housing that is not taken care of, those neighborhoods may be chipped away, one house at a time, and those neighborhoods die. So what our DG Save Our Neighborhoods group is asking, this is a reminder regarding STRs, we would like you to separate bed and breakfast inns from short-term rentals. They are two different creatures. They should be handled very differently. Increase bed and breakfast regulations in the draft zoning code 15049 to reflect more of what used to be in the zoning code for bed and breakfast inns in code 15020. Add STRs as a new land use category and create regulations that are easy to find, easy to comply with, and easy to enforce. No one right now in town knows where to go, who to talk to about adding an STR to their property or complaining about an STR that's next door or just down the street from them, other than possibly the police department. We ask that you require some form of STR registration, similar to what you already require in BG's rental dwelling registration program. But we also would like you to consider a yearly renewal and possible penalties for non-compliance, because historically in College Town, there is non-compliance as an issue. And we would also like you to designate both bed and breakfast inns and STRs as conditional uses. All right, let's talk about accessory dwelling units, ADUs, often romantically called granny flats, which is kind of odd. The only granny I know of was on the Beverly Hillbillies. But anyhow, granny flats, in-law units, accessory apartments, secondary suites, backyard cottages, they all sound very good. And we can agree that ADUs add value to a property. The investment return on building an ADU or converting a basement to an ADU or a garage into an ADU is very good. However, ADUs are good for whom? They offer a relatively quick and inexpensive way to create much needed housing, but that housing is usually known to us as rental units. Not that rental units are bad, but we have some history in this town with some rental units that are not good. ADUs are currently listed as a conditional use in the zoning code. But how difficult is it to acquire a conditional approval via section 15098 of the code? I don't think it's probably very difficult. So our citizens group would like you to consider banning ADUs from the central district or from the pedestrian district for the following reasons. One, granny flats will not be used by your granny or my granny or your aging in-laws. Single-family homeowners will not make the investment of adding a rental property on their own property. They will simply move out of the neighborhood. In Bowling Green, ADUs will be built as rentals, there's no doubt, either as long-term or as Airbnbs, AKA STRs. So we're back to the fundamental rental market problem here in town, a general problem with control over the rental situation in BG. We have no regulations whatsoever on STRs. And now you're asking us to add to the problem by adding more rental units to the pedestrian district in the form of ADUs. That doesn't make sense. Picture your own backyard right now, wherever you live in town. Picture that backyard. All right. Now picture your next door neighbor building a 20-foot high ADU in their backyard, right next to yours, overlooking your backyard. How many people can live in that ADU? What will they be doing in that ADU or outside that ADU? Where will they park their cars? With BG's spotty history of abating rental property problems, will ADUs and STRs be any different? Our group suggests that City Council and the administration get its code enforcement house in order before it allows more potential, probably problems to deal with, all right? No to ADUs and sensible regulations and registration for STRs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ross Mazapapa, 246 South Enterprise Street. I'm speaking tonight in opposition to the 2-unit dwellings allowed in the current PR zone language. According to the BG Save Our Neighborhood Group's visual survey, it is clear that 40% of dwelling units are in a 2-unit or multi-unit building. 25% of properties already have existing multi-unit structures or ADUs. This data doesn't account for non-obvious multi-unit dwellings, of which I can name at least 4 properties within the 2 blocks of South Enterprise Street where I reside. One house next door has up to 4 non-related individuals living in it, maybe 5. Sometimes it's hard to determine how many people are actually there based off of the overflow of vehicles into the street and in the back alley. Again, hearkening back to Rose Hess's comments about individuals per house. The PR zone is supposed to attract long-term young professionals who wish to invest in the city of Bowling Green. I can tell you as a former renter for several years in the city and a member of the university, it might be difficult to attract the desired young professionals with 2-unit dwellings to rent long-term. Some professionals do not want to rent. We want to purchase an affordable single-family home that we can invest in and begin to grow generational wealth, of which my generation holds less than 10%, while older generations possess more than 50% in this country. We want access to downtown and the multitude of services available within the walking distance, but still live in a relatively quiet neighborhood of family and friends. And to the comment that we have 64% rentals, but are in such poor conditions that young professionals don't want to stay, only tells me that we have a code enforcement problem, not an availability option for them. Right? As to the gentleman who spoke before me, stated he had multiple options for rentals, but nothing that really met his quality standards. What if we upkept the rentals to have accessible, safe, and desirable standards? Wouldn't this be better than new construction? It would also be much more environmentally friendly to update and to upgrade the rentals that we already have than new construction would provide. The neighborhoods that consist of the PR zone are the oldest and most affordable houses in the city. My generation, as a fact, can simply not afford to live in the Bird Streets or Stone Ridge. We can afford the neighborhood's walking distance to downtown. Please, I implore you to protect these neighborhoods for residents, people who want to be a part of the fabric of the city long term. Please remove the allowance for 2-unit dwellings from the PR zone code, and please update the code enforcement for rental units. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Neuendorf, 1057 Carroll Road. Thank you for having this hearing. I find it fascinating. A year ago, we bought a house in May. Last year, we bought a house in Bowling Green. My wife and I spent lots of time coming down here looking through the neighborhoods. We owned a house in the old West End and lived there for 47 years. We moved down here because of family conditions, and I'm getting old. You saw me walk up here, you know what I mean. Anyway, I want you to consider that the necessity to protect the historic nature of Bowling Green. When I drive down 25, I can pretend that I'm driving down 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, because the bones are still there. The downtown is still there. Now, behind some of the buildings downtown, you've torn down historic structures for parking. Okay, you're not going to fix those. The reason a zoning code was created is to protect neighborhoods and protect houses so that when you have a house or property, you don't suddenly get a factory next door, that you don't get a non-conforming use that destroys the value of your property. So what you're considering here is protecting the properties as they exist. Now, the argument is, do you restore or do you continue to have not well-maintained properties? And that's been brought up, that some of those properties are not well-maintained. There's a reason for that. That was one of the reasons for that court decision that the first Rose, I think her name is Mrs. Hess, Rose Hess, came up and spoke. And that court decision is fabulous. It's a tool. And guess what? You're not using it. You're ignoring it. And I'll get by. I've spent some time, nerdish time, reviewing the BG Municipal Code. You've got a good code. It's not a bad code. I don't care if it's 75 years old. It's been amended, and it could be amended again. Changing it, throwing it out is a radical. One of the things I found in looking at the municipal code was something I found very strange. Sorry, I come from a big city. I was very familiar with the Toledo Municipal Code. Your Bowling Green Municipal Code is a code, from my reading, that's voluntary. Now, how do I say that? It's got rules, right? But for example, you have what's called self-inspection. He owns a house. He goes around his house, he gets with his form, he checks off everything, and he turns it in. Nobody double checks it. There aren't inspections in this town. I mean, that would be a good system if every week or every day, an inspector in the city of Bowling Green picked a house and said, I'm inspecting your house today, and see if your inspection form is accurate. Self-inspection, that's like somebody saying, what are your best, on a dating site, what are your best virtues? We know how reliable those sites are. Anyway, self-inspection, a very strange concept. The zoning code here is not enforced. Now, I can go around and look at houses because I'm a nerd like this. You want to see the condition of houses in Bowling Green? Drive down the alleys. Don't drive down the main street, drive down the alleys. When you drive down the alleys, you'll see what we're talking about properties that are not well maintained. And those are not properties owned by people, homeowners. They're rental properties. Why? Because if you're making money, and that's what the issue is here, if you're making money, you want the most money for the property. And that means to delay maintenance and to cheat. Now, how do you cheat? Well, the lawsuit said 3-bedroom house, 3 people. Because you can't use the living room, you can't use the basement. There are all these, the law is very clear. You can use what's in traditionally bedrooms in the house. You can't take a bedroom and chop it into 4 pieces and call it 4 bedrooms. It's what the house was built with. And you can determine that by walking in and looking at it. But guess what? We don't do that. We don't inspect in Bowling Green. We trust people. They're all honest. They wouldn't use the initiative. They wouldn't use the initiative to make a buck, to cheat. We know that they wouldn't do that. Now, I'm cynical. I come from a big city. I think there are a few landlords here that are more interested in making money than providing safe housing, which is the second thing I want to bring up with the self-inspection. Why should you have the fire department, and I mean the fire department, and the inspection division go out and inspect houses for safety? What happens if one of these buildings with 5 or 6 or 7 people living in it burns up in the middle of the night and those people die? You're going to pay hell for it. If the Fultz thing at the university gave BG a bad name, but there are towns that require that every house be inspected by the fire department and the inspection division for that reason, because they lost kids in that at a university town. They lost people. So it's fire safety, safety for the tenants. Okay, they're here for 4 years. Do we want them to live and leave Bowling Green or decide to stay here because they're still alive, or because they didn't have a proper means of egress from their living, their bedroom? No ADUs at all. They look like hell. They depreciate the value, the historic value of the city. And if you want to build an ADU, they can go outside the city limits and build as many as they want. I mean, that's why there are all those apartments southeast of town. 600 petitioners. I had 600 people show up at a meeting in Toledo. I'd be thrilled. In fact, that scares city council when that many people show up. These are all about market forces, we're told. The people that have come here in favor of it say it's about market forces. Yes, it's about market forces. It's about the city you want versus the one that's for sale. Density is the issue. And who does it benefit? Density doesn't benefit the homeowners next door. It benefits the people who are renting property. So they want to jack it up. But remember, they can do that because there's no inspections. That's why you get back to parking. Why are the streets parked up? Because there are too many people trying to live in buildings that aren't adequate. You can control by saying that there's one parking space for each rental unit. Let me go to the last and most important point. The reason this is flawed is you don't have data. You really don't. You don't know what's out there. I could go and pick a house and we could go in there and it's 5 mailboxes. Do they have 5 bedrooms? I bet you money they don't. We could go out there, but you don't have the data. BG does not have the necessary data on density to make this decision. You have a jewel in this community. I know, I came from the big city. If you don't want Bowling Green to end up like Perrysburg, which is a pretty nice place to live, if you want people to come here, then you protect this jewel that you have in the residential area around downtown and return it to single family homes. Don't let them chop them up, because what will happen is what happened on East Worcester. There are tooths missing from the fabric of the city across from the university. Why? Because they were allowed to be destroyed. And if you don't believe me, go down the alleys in the areas outside. I could go by and find garages that are now residential units. Call them granny houses, call them whatever you want. Profit-making enterprises. You have a jewel. Is it for sale, or are you going to preserve the city of Bowling Green? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Karen Wood, 840 Clough Street, and you'll be happy to know this will be the shortest testimony tonight. I've resigned myself to the fact that this is probably going to pass, but I thought I would get my 2 cents in. I see both sides of the issue. I really do. Everybody who's spoken tonight has made sense on both sides. But I live on the east side, and I see how badly this can go for Buttonwood and you name it, all those streets over there, Maple, those nice streets, I see how it's gonna go, and it's gonna look like my side of this side of town. So I'm asking city council to consider, number one, hiring a liaison or an ombudsman so that any current issues get taken care of, which frankly, they're not now, and any future issues that come up with this code change will be resolved quickly and efficiently. I also ask number two, that I hope that the nuisance abatement or the zoning laws finally get some teeth in them so they mean something. And I could speak on this for a couple of hours about what it's like to live on the east side. The horror stories I have would keep you up at night. But my fear is, and this is my final point, I fear that the west side of Bowling Green will begin to look like the east side of Bowling Green if you vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Flieger. I reside at 325 North Prospect, and I'm here to speak about non-conforming properties. Non-conforming properties have been a problem for the neighborhoods around Bowling Green for many years. They are spread across the neighborhoods of Bowling Green and within the proposed PR district. As of March 2023, there are currently 260 non-conforming properties listed, with the latest one being added on the 13th of September, 2021. The issue of non-conforming properties was identified by two of the consultants that the city paid to do assessments of Bowling Green. In the 2014 land use plan, the consultant stated that the city needs to, I quote, stop the apartmentalization of houses and address non-conforming issues. That was in 2014. 2018, the CAP plan. On page 7, under the target reinvestment, it states residential sections of the northeast and southeast neighborhoods are currently showing signs of deferred maintenance and blight. The vision to improve these areas is to cater to their dominant populations with redevelopment in the northeast focused on families, post-collegiate professionals, and BGSU faculty. It further goes on to state that there is a real or perceived conflict between the landlords, renters, and homeowners. Residents fear that the ratio of owner occupied to rental housing is tipped too far towards the latter and must be balanced for neighborhood improvement to occur. Further, the CAP under targeted reinvestment areas, it states the target reinvestment areas are primarily residential sections of the northeast and southeast neighbors that are currently showing signs of a general lack of investment and increasing blight. Residents in these areas are primarily renters, and existing buildings show a high percentage of non-conforming uses and substandard exterior conditions. One of the approaches that was recommended was to amortize some of the properties to reduce the non-conforming properties. Amortization is an approach to require removal of a specific class of uses, signs, or other from a specific district or within an area established in an established time period. While sometimes difficult, often unpopular, and subject to legal challenge, amortization can be a viable approach when necessary to achieve the community policy. Amortization in the American planning system is a technique for the removal of non-conforming uses after the value of a non-conforming use has been recovered or amortized over a period of time. In some instances, zoning ordinances set time periods for phasing out different uses of non-conforming uses. The beginnings of amortization can be traced from the birth of zoning ordinance in 1916. So this is nothing new, and it's something that can be used to get rid of non-conforming properties. The Internal Revenue Service establishes the depreciation period for different classes of property. One example that I found that residential properties have a 27-year amortization period. In some cases, that depreciation period starts at the time that the property became non-conforming. In the case with many of the non-conforming properties in Bowling Green, That time started many, many years ago, meaning they've made their money back on these properties that were non-conforming. Finally, it is important to keep in mind that amortization does not purport fully to compensate a property owner for all actual and potential actual and opportunity costs, such as future profit potential. Courts have held that the owner of a nonconforming structure may be required to accept some loss upon termination. It is recognized that as the benefit of the public from amortization increases, the owner's loss may also be incurred. I would ask council to consider taking up this issue as it has been recommended in the past, and this may be the perfect time to do so and follow what the consultants recommended to this city on 2 different occasions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Janet Knapp, 504 South Main Street. I spoke to you the other night at the council meeting, and I would like to thank you for the responses that I did receive this time when I sent the email out for a second time from 4 of the council members regarding the Walk Through My Neighborhood PowerPoint presentation that I mentioned Monday. Um, uh, I agree with you. You see what happens from the back alleys, and that's what my PowerPoint presentation showed, all of the infractions that happen with high-density rentals in a neighborhood that is historic. In light of the recent survey, I also had a spirited conversation with my ward councilperson, Rachel Phipps, and some of my questions were indeed answered. In light of the recent survey, which you've seen tonight and has been referred to, indicating the high percentage, at least 40% of duplexes, multi-unit, and ADUs currently in the proposed PR district, we are requesting that the new zoning does not allow additional duplexes and ADUs at this time. This issue can be postponed and reviewed in the future, especially after a lot of the initiatives that Rachel and I discussed. Historic preservation, implementation, the new commission there is working on a lot of different things. It would give a lot of the homeowners in the neighborhood an opportunity to apply for historic neighborhood restrictions or identification. And if we allow that some time to work through, that could address some of the things. The inspection of the rentals with a new self-inspection form, which is soon to be released, but we've already heard comments about self-inspections. I'm not very hopeful that that's going to solve a lot of problems. The new nuisance complaint button on the city website is reported to be activated this summer. And I think that will go a long way to allowing us as neighbors to get some of these complaints about properties addressed. And that's a good thing. And I know the city's working hard on that. But again, we need time for that to be in place for a while to see what's going on. And then importantly, the opposition of homeowners in the PR district, give them some additional time to address the density in our neighborhoods. We want to keep single-family homes as single-family homes, not converted to duplexes. You've heard many homeowners in our district request this. While I've not attended all of the meetings, I have yet to hear from one homeowner who wants the ability to convert their currently owned property to a duplex. While I appreciate Matt Bosdorf's intellect and articulate comments, and I sat in a meeting with him and appreciated what he had to say, let's be clear, Matt is an investor. He is buying single-family homes and turning them into rentals in our PR district. Other districts could accommodate more rentals, not our district. Please protect our historic homes and our property values. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Snyder, 306 Westwood Drive. I came to a council meeting April 17th and was advised that the Arboretum was not going to be turned into a dog park. And the Arboretum was not going to be turned into a dog park. So out of the 4 choices, that leaves 3. And I talked to Kristen Otley, and she said that a dog park can't be put in the Winter Garden Park. So that leaves 2 places, Ridge Street and Coneyot Haskins. So which one of those 2 is it going to be?
Mr. Schneider, again, I have not been advised. I mean, I don't know anyone can offer.
Jeff, you've been in meetings on the dog parks, right? Have they narrowed it down to?
We're not going to narrow any locations down, let alone asking. There's going to need to be a robust public engagement process that needs to take place, including a public hearing like this one before any decision is made. We have not so much as agreed with the city administration on who's going to operate the dog park or basics like that. So it's way too early in the process to designate any locations. I mean, we don't know who's going to run the thing.
Mr. Schneider, did you talk to Kristen Otley since you appeared in council?
Say that again?
Did you talk to did you talk to Kristen Otley since you came to council? Is that what you said? I'm sorry. Okay. Would have good information. Is there anything else you want to just share with council at this time?
No, I guess not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joseph DeMar. I live at 517 South Main. And I hadn't intended to speak tonight. Mostly I was just going to listen and take notes. But in taking those notes, I realized there's a couple things that I kind of want to bring to your attention. One is any changes you make in the zoning code should not prevent people from putting solar panels on their house. So that needs to be specified clearly. We had a statement there that the number of people opposed to this is small. And I felt like I needed to respond to that to Mr. Bosdorf, because there's an even smaller group of people that are having an outsized influence on the city's policies, and that is the landlords. The landlords in this city are a tiny number of people compared to the 600 that have already signed petitions. And yet they have an outsized influence on what happens. And I was also struck by a little bit of history from what some of the other people said, particularly Mr. Kaufman. He mentioned that he was unable to find a habitable apartment building. He finally searched and found 1 out of 4, basically, that he could live in. And he also mentioned that basically in his testimony, he said that Bowling Green is already walkable, that one of the reasons he picked the place he is now is he can already walk to any kind of amenities that he needs, which is great. But I want to draw a connection here to another policy that was touched on, and that was the fact that our inspection system is voluntary. Now, my very good friend, Diocles Leontis, worked very hard while he was on the committee to create an inspection policy that would be fair to everyone and that would have improved. Mr. Kaufman might have been able to find on his first apartment, he might have been able to find a habitable one had the council not bowed to the wishes of the landlords and made that policy voluntary. So I think the main point I want to make here is that in a democracy, you should listen to the 600 and not the half a dozen. You know, you should listen to the 600 people that passionately come before you and not the half dozen that have more money than those 600 put together. But the reason we have a democracy is for the 600, not for the six. Those half dozen of the wealthiest, they already have plenty of influence. They already can take care of themselves. They have lawyers. They don't need you. They don't need a city council. We need you. And that's why I wanted to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Great. My name is Kathleen Dixon. I live at 1058 Mulrose Street, and I've been a citizen taxpayer voter for many years, since 1985. And I've both rented in this city for a very long time, and now I've been a homeowner for a very long time. And I want to encourage you to analyze the concept of self-inspection. It's ludicrous. And it fails to represent due regard for the safety and the well-being of the renters who are coming to our city and who are in our care. The idea that someone could simply state and check off on a document that their building, which they're now profiting from, is going to be safe for fire, safe with respect to safe sewage, safe with respect to water, is a failure of our responsibilities to the people who come to pay rent. So I encourage you very strongly to do due diligence, to get an engineering study on the water system, the sewage system, to ensure for the well-being of all of the citizens of Bowling Green that those systems are up to the additional stresses that are going to be placed by denser residency. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Jody? Oh, that's it. Okay. Thank you very much. So we are now to the part of the public hearing. The fourth and final part is discussion by members of City Council. Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to compliment every one of you for showing up. I'm sure I speak for council that we really appreciate your sacrifice and your passion, as well as your stick-to-itiveness. And believe it or not, even after the many opportunities that you have availed yourselves of, there's new material, new comments that have been voiced tonight. And I think I'm just super impressed. And I wanted to thank you for what you've done. I'm hopeful that you've had a positive impact, and keep working at it. So thank you.
Else? I mean, I'll respond quickly to just a couple points made during testimony. First, Rose Hess, I mean, you showed up at council a few weeks or maybe even months ago now, talking about occupancy. In the interim, we did check in with city attorney, and we've been advised that 150.60 does reduce to code the decision in Yoder. So it is okay. Sorry. Since Rose showed up at council a few weeks or months ago, we did reach out to city attorney and were advised that new code section 150.60 that addresses occupancy does reduce to new code the decision in Yoder. So we did get an answer there. I'm happy to talk to Hunter with you, Rose, if we want to explore that a little bit more, but that should be Yoder in writing in our code. And as far as David, could you, at your earliest convenience, send us, everything collected for the survey? Just a little bit more background on. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Madam Chair, quick question.
Sure.
It was also stated, I believe, by Sandy Wicks that we have received a petition, and I have not received a petition.
Yeah,
Has that been
I-
somebody at the city holding that?
To my knowledge, we have not received petition signatures either, or language. Of course, would you step up to the mic, please, David?
If you want it, we'll be happy to send it to you.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add at this time?
I'll go last because I have some closing comments.
Okay.
So if anyone. Nope. All right. This table moves.
It does.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. A lot of the things we heard tonight, we've heard multiple times. But it's important, especially when big decisions are being made, that citizens participate. And I want you to rest assured that no one's opinion weighs more than anyone else's opinion when it comes to council making these decisions, with the exception of possibly my mother, who has not weighed in on this, so we're good. Again, I would like to thank you. Many times you've posed questions to us, and we have not given you direct answers to those questions. We meant no disrespect by that. It's simply the process. We collect information, we analyze information, and ultimately we make decisions. So I just would like to thank you all for giving us information to help us in our decision making. I would ask that members of council put together amendments that you plan on introducing to what we have right now. And I know some of you have already sent those out, but if everyone could do that and copy the other council members so everyone is aware of amendments you're planning on making. Also copy Jody on those so that we can put together a comprehensive list to distribute to all the council members. And that's all I have for tonight.
Next steps. Voted on as such.
This will come off the table at council's June 12th meeting. During that meeting, once it comes off the table, members will make amendments. We'll vote on amendments. And I anticipate that ultimately at some point that evening, we will have an up or down vote on ordinance 9098.
Does anyone have anything else to add at this time? Okay. Thanks everyone for your participation this evening. This concludes the public hearing on ordinance 9098.